Hello student, today we're going to talk about environmental science. This course mainly offered to the BTech chemistry or BTech people. Myself, Dr. Susmita Pramanik, I am assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry, SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Cotton Growth campus. So, what is environment? So, environment is anything around us. For example, if a person is sitting on the chair in a garden, anything around him would be him or her would be that environment. For example, he's sitting on the chair, the grass around him, including the chair, and then the grasses, trees. If there is any birds flying by or nearby, and then the flowers, the insects, whatever you can consider, whatever you find around, it's all considered is your environment. So again, so the person who is sitting in that particular garden is his environment. If we can extend the area, it can reach to the city, and then it could reach to the country, and finally the whole universe, including the earth. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say that everything, whatever you see around, is of your environment. If you really see about lithosphere, which is basically core of the earth, so which has different layers, it's also considered as is your environment. Then atmosphere, that the air, the layer of air present on the top of the earth's surface, it's also is your or our environment. Then the biosphere, which is exactly what we see, all the animals, insect, or living system, whatever around us is also our environment. And the hydrosphere, which is the water around us, which is the two-thirds of the earth. So the question comes, why we should study that environment. The environmental studies is very important for us. It's basically explain you how we interact with that environment or around us. For example, is that how do we upset the natural balances? For example, if you are taking too much crude oil from the earth, okay, then you are digging up all the earth, or even mining processes, everything you're digging up from the earth, and then you produce a lot of pollution. So basically, you are losing or you are disturbing the balance because you produce a lot of carbon dioxide, you inhale oxygen, all of your activities actually lead to different kind of waste, and that actually lead to that imbalance in the natural system. Then how do you use the resources? So that's what exactly I was saying, that it's like coal, oil, or even the plants, everything, whatever is available in this universe, how we're using it, how do you produce the waste. So basically, I will tell in later slides that whatever we work, it actually lead, whatever we use, it's at some point that could be waste. So basically, the kind of waste we produce every day, how we are basically treating it, treating that waste to keep our environment clean, or we actually adding up some other things as well, which is also dangerous for our life on this earth. And basically, finally, we will talk about the consequences. Okay, so as a whole, if we say about that, how we upset the natural balance is actually the ecosystem, the place where we are living. Without any disturbance, that should be very fruitful, like a communication between different part of that ecosystem, which includes your natural living and non-living systems. And when you disbalance or disconnect one of the component in that particular ecosystem, whole ecosystem will be destroyed. So those things we need to discuss throughout this course. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the atmosphere. So that the composition and how is the length of the Earth's surface. We'll be discussing all these things in that particular part of this module. So basically, the atmosphere is a layer of gas that's present on the Earth's surface, and the range of this particular that atmosphere is from the Earth's surface till 600 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Okay, So basically, it's the Earth atmosphere is a layer of gases surrounding the planet. The Earth is surrounded by a blanket of air, which we call atmosphere. It reaches 560 and roughly 60 kilometers from the Earth's surface. The atmosphere is a very important for our life to sustain on this Earth. It absorbs the energy from the sun and which keeps it around us and keep it warm. Recycle the water and the chemicals. So basically, the water vaporize and then come back to the earth's surface in the form of rain and other chemicals, which basically you can also talk about the pollutants. Okay, like different gases, different metals. That probably we talk about the leaded petrol that produce a lot of metal chemicals. Okay, so during the rain, these all goes back to the surface as in the form or dissolved in the rain. So it somehow clean our atmosphere, protect us from the high energy radiation, which is basically UV radiation that can cause skin cancer, which is basically done by the ozone layer present above 10 kilometers high. The atmosphere protects and support our life that I already told you at the beginning. So there are different layers. So basically you can see until 10 kilometers we have thermosphere, where basically everything happen in the sense all the weather and all the changes we see. But when you go to about 50 kilometers, from 10 kilometers, the layer is called the mesosphere. So there mainly nothing happen, and sorry, stratosphere, and then we have the mesosphere, and finally we have thermosphere. So basically troposphere is our bottom, which is from the earth surface to 10 kilometer from the earth surface. Then 10 to 50 we have the stratosphere, 50 to 80 we have a mesosphere, and 80 to 600 kilometers we have thermosphere. So we'll be discussing a little bit about all these layers, and we will see how the composition changes and also the temperature, pressure, everything will be changed with in all these particular layers of atmosphere. So first troposphere, we basically we live, and that actually the layer, the thickness of the layer could be 8 kilometers around the poles and 16 kilometers at the equator. Okay, on an average we say it is a 10 kilometer. So 90% of the atmospheric mass present here. Okay, so basically all the air, heavy air, basically, or gases, they stay in this particular layer. The temperature decreases along in altitude, so basically 6 degree per kilometer, and the top of the atmosphere temperature could be average minus 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, the reason for that, because the light from the sun, it falls on the earth's surface, it warm up, and then when it goes away from the surface, basically the temperature slowly dissipates, so we don't feel it. So that is why the temperature decreases when we go above the earth's surface. Basically you can take an example that you have a lamp or a bulb which is switched on, and then you place your hand very close, you see very hotter, and you move your hand away from it and the temperature goes down. So basically that is the same phenomenon happening. uh, Weather occurs, basically all the storm, rain, everything, clouds you see in this particular layer. The boundary between the troposphere and the next stratosphere is called the tropopause. Okay. Then stratosphere. Stratosphere basically is extend from 10 kilometers to 50 kilometers above the ground. The air is very less. Okay, the temperature decreases with the altitude. So that where it is very cold. So there is no weather occurs. Basically, no rain, no cloud, no storm, and it contains a lot of ozone over there. Okay, and this is the layer where the UV radiation absorb. Okay, so temperature increases. If I say decreases, wrong, it is increases, and that because of the reason that when the ozone gas molecules absorb the sunlight, it breaks, it produces oxygen molecule and the oxygen radical, and all these processes are exothermic, means it produces the heat. So when you go above to that particular layer, the density of that ozone gas increases, and therefore there are more reaction happening, and at the same and therefore the temperature started to increase with the increase in the height. The upper boundary of that stratosphere is called the stratopause. Next is the mesosphere. It extends almost 80 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Gases are even less dense. So basically, you know that the heavier gases always stay near the Earth's surface, and when you go above the Earth's surface, the more less dense gases are present over there. And then the upper boundary is called the mesopause, and this is the boundary between the mesosphere and the thermosphere atmospheric region. The temperature decreases, and the reason here is that there is no gases to absorb that light from the sun, light from the sun. Basically, whatever that comes from the sun is just go through, and temperature goes down. Okay, it is one of the coldest layer of the atmosphere. And gases in this layer also absorbs a little bit of UV radiation, so you don't see the change in the temperature. Then the thermosphere is basically again it extends until like 600 kilometers above the Earth's surface from 80 kilometers. The temperature increases. So now the thing is that you are basically going closer to the sun. At the same time, there are a lot of gas molecules are there, and it always reacting in the presence of sunlight and produce lot of ions, and that is why it is called the ionosphere as well. And the temperature of this layer can go up to the 1050 degrees Celsius, and where it basically that reflects the radio waves. So all the radio waves actually communication happens through this particular layer. Exosphere is basically starting from 600 kilometers to no limit. Okay, so where all the satellites and Earth and everything just orbit around the Earth, and then we do all the communication. And you know what are the satellites are doing? They send on the messages from that particular layer. They're sitting over there. Okay, so the layers of the atmosphere. So there are basically four layers. So we have troposphere where we live, and the temperature started to decrease when we move from that the surface towards that layer above the surface. And then we have particularly the stratosphere, where basically ozone is exactly the ozone layer. It basically absorbs the sunlight and the chemical reaction, and the temperature started to increase along with it. Then this is also known as ozone layer. Then we have the mesosphere, where the coldest layer, and we have a lot of the temperature decreases when you move up in the layer. And finally, this is one of the coldest layer basically, and then we have thermosphere, where the temperature is just shoot up once you move from that particular above the height. Okay, so basically that's all, and this is the overall picture. So if you think about the pressure in that y-axis, so pressure basically dropped down drastically. Okay, and this is because that air of the mass of the air goes down, the density goes down, so the pressure also goes down. And then the temperature is sometimes decreasing, then increasing, again decreasing, again increasing exponentially rapidly. Okay, so all these things happening, and that all the reasons are basically presence of with different gases. They are reacting, produce a lot of heats, or there is no gases, there is no reaction, and doesn't produce heat or it absorb heat from the sunlight. So all the reason why these things are actually changing. Now we're going to talk about the composition of the atmosphere. So basically the total mass of the atmosphere is about 5.65 million billion tons. This is a huge number. It's very difficult to imagine, in fact. But if you see the composition, is basically the main component are nitrogen and the oxygen. So about 78% of the atmospheric gas is the nitrogen, and the oxygen having 21%. So in total, we have 99%. The two gases. But the rest, which is basically we have argon, water vapor, carbon dioxide, ozone, and all of it. These are within 1%. Now you can think about that what we're talking about the carbon dioxide. Yeah, this is very small quantity, but it can lead to very bad effects. Okay. So then we're going to talk about the cycle of the oxygen, how it is happening. So the oxygen cycle is basically, as we all know, during the photosynthesis, that a plant basically absorbs the sunlight, and it also intake carbon dioxide. It gets nutrients from the soil, and it converts the carbon dioxide into the glucose and oxygen. This oxygen basically, we the animal who does not able to produce that oxygen, they inhale, they produce the carbon dioxide. So that is particularly what happening in the oxygen cycle on the Earth's surface. Now what about the nitrogen? Nitrogen having like 71%. So nitrogen basically very inert. It does not involve in any sort of reaction. It is very difficult to break even. and but it has a very important role in our body, because if you think about proteins, these all are amino acids. Okay, these have a nitrogen over there, and that nitrogen has to come from the earth atmosphere. Okay, and basically if you really have this particular situation, like you have oxygen and nitrogen you need, then how it is done? Because nitrogen is one of the most stable molecule on the earth. So the two nitrogen atoms having three covalent bonds, they're very stable over there. Okay, the human plant basically cannot use nitrogen molecule directly from the atmosphere. So basically there is one bacteria which is also known as nitrophane bacteria. They actually convert this nitrogen from the atmosphere into particular ammonium salts, and that ammonium salts taken up by the plants, and they actually basically synthesize protein in their molecule in their body. These proteins we eat as food, and we break it down and we produce our amino acids. Okay, so that's how the process happen. Okay. Okay, the composition of the atmosphere still, so this is the nitrogen cycle that happening. So basically, nitrogen coming along with the water, or rain, it goes to the underground, and then a lot of nitrogen bacteria that there which convert this nitrogen to ammonia or ammonium salt or ammonia, and then there are more different kind of bacteria that convert into nitrate or nitrite, and finally that goes into the plant, and which actually basically convert into the amino acids, and we eat that and we use that nitrogen for our health or body. But this is not sufficient if you think about the modern days consumptions of nitrogen containing compound, particularly fertilizer. It is not basically sufficient. So for that, basically we need industrial production, and thanks to Haber and Bosch process, we actually first and produce that ammonia by reacting nitrogen and the hydrogen in presence of catalyst and high temperature. So there are more advancement happen, new catalyst or new chemical synthesis has been proposed or developed. So nowadays it is not that much difficult to produce the nitrogen. So, in the atmosphere, basically there are two different kinds of gases we can divide. Basically, one is called permanent gases, one is variable gases. So permanent gases are always present in the atmosphere. They are abundant. They don't change their composition like oxygen, nitrogen, argon. But variable gases, they change their amount with the time. Basically, with different season, you can see that amount of vapor or that moisture in our atmosphere is different. Yeah. So water vapor is a variable gas. It changes with the season. So these are two different kinds of gases, permanent and the variable gases. The examples I have mentioned. In the relevant terms, the homosphere is basically the lowest 80 kilometers from atmosphere, where the relative abundance of the permanent gases is constant. The heterospheres, they are not basically constant, they changes, and we basically see that the oxygen, the gases are basically present layer by layer based on the density. So basically, the two different things, which is called homosphere. One other things, other way you can think about homosphere, they all mix together, they live together. Heterosphere, they don't mix together, they actually present as a layer by layer. So with like a, you can see that layer by layer cakes. You see some sort of bread, and then some cream, then bread, then cream. So all the different gases which actually present in the different layer. This is called heterosphere. Okay. So then we're going to talk about environmental pollution. Okay, so in the next class we'll be talking about environmental pollution. So we'll stop here.